women have been told that suffering is okay. What a lot of women that were there said to me is they loved the idea that they were empowered to have sex on demand, something they used only when they needed it, never when they didn't. And then there were several practitioners there, like women like yourself who really are counselors and guides for women through their, reproductive journey, who said that when the women that they counseled used Fex, they said they loved the idea of putting it in front of their partner. That they were like, you know what? I'm comfortable with my own body. I'm going to insert the applicator, throw it away, and it's going to be awesome because I'm comfortable with my sexuality. It's lubricating. And they said their partners loved it.
Electricast. Welcome to Season 4 of Transforming 45. I'm your host, Lisa Boate, and this season we're stepping fully into our power. The heat, the hormones, the heartbreak, the healing. This is Midlife, raw and redefined. Each episode, you'll hear stories of humans who are rewriting the rules, reclaiming their bodies, their desires, their voices. This is where we stop shrinking, start shining, and remember who the hell we are. Because midlife isn't a crisis, it's an awakening. Let's get transforming 45. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Transforming 45. I am so excited to welcome someone who has been reshaping women's health with serious courage and clarity. Saundra Pelletier, CEO of Evofem Biosciences, is the force behind Phexxi, the first hormone-free, on-demand birth control with the recent expansion of Evofem's work with Solosec. Since joining Evofem in 2015, she's taken the company public, raised over $500 million, and published conversations in sexual and reproductive health into the spotlight, where they belong. Before that, she led Women Care Global, bringing essential health products to women in more than 100 countries. Saundra is a visionary, mission-driven leader, a sought-after speaker, and someone who does not wait for permission to make change. Saundra, I've been so looking forward to this conversation. Thank you so much, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I too have been looking forward to it. So I'm excited to be here. Yeah, thanks so much.
All right, so let's start at the beginning. So who are you, and how did life introduce you to this version?
So I'm a person who grew up in a very small rural town, the furthest point in the United States where I live now. I grew up in a place called Caribou, Maine, and I was raised by a woman who had 10 brothers and sisters and grew up on a farm with outdoor plumbing. And that mattered. Why it mattered is she really taught me to open my eyes and look around and see the choices that women and girls had. And that really led me to women's health. I have spent my entire career in big pharma, small pharma, nonprofits, focusing on access to innovative products, not just Me Too products in crowded categories, but products that really change the quality of life of women. And I am a mom of one boy who is 18. And for the most part, I say that what chooses you, you choose back. And I am a staunch advocate for real talk, transparency, no bullshit, and really talking about the things that women care about without superficial nicety. So, yeah.
Yeah. And that is exactly what is needed in this time. So, one, we were just in New Brunswick. My sons are huge fans of Noah Kahn. So we went and we found where the border was without actually having to cross. We took a picture and we were like, look, guys, Maine is behind us.
I love that. Oh my God, I love that. Because you're right. It's right on the border of New
Yeah.
Brunswick, Canada.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
cool that you
So
went there.
we were just recently there, and you are so right. And not a lot of people talk about this, like that deep seed of where this need comes from. You know, as we grew up in similar times, being Gen X humans and being in a rural space and living in some duality, because I had this experience as well. I grew up in a very small town. I had a mother who was an absolute firecracker. I learned feminism from her and I learned advocacy from her. And we lived in this very small rural town where farming was the main industry. And then we lived in this time where women were really rising in power in this social cultural context. And so thank you for acknowledging that because it is such an important seed that we see start to flourish over time, especially in this absolutely wild time that we find ourselves in. I don't know about you, but from that seed, I did not ever imagine that this is the future we were going to end up in.
My goodness. Same. In fact, it's almost like an alternate reality, like we've entered the twilight zone. And, I thought we were on a path to make so much continual progress. And then all of a sudden, a halt happens. And I think the most gobsmacking and frustrating thing for me is I believe that strong women don't have attitudes, they have standards. And I really want to shake the trees on what are our standards. We decide what we deserve. Why are we accepting less than we deserve? And so I'm hoping that that curve shifts, back toward a lot of progress.
We were talking just before we started recording about the role of bringing everyone into that conversation. So we have been doing this advocacy and doing the work for a long time on our own and with some advocates, but we need so many more allies. You have a young son. I have two young sons. And so I know that men are not born as violent, controlling, all of these things that society tells them is what they need to be a man. I always go back to thinking about my little boys. I went into their rooms one night and my oldest was curled up with his puppy Stuffy under his chin and his baby blanket was on his head. And he was like 8 or 9 at the time. And then I walked across the hall into my other son's room and he had this little box and he'd gotten an eagle Stuffy for Christmas. He was like, "Look, Mom, I made a little bed for my eagle so I can take care of it." And in that moment, there is so much nurture and beauty and love and caring in the souls of these male humans that come into the planet. And how did you nurture your young human to be someone who is going to be an ally and stand with us? Like, not in front. We're not looking for protectors. We don't need people in front of us, but we need people beside us to do this work together.
Okay, well, first I want to say your boys sound amazing. Like, love them. Love, love, love them. And I love the comment that we don't need men to stand in front of us. We don't need protectors. We need allies and advocates. We need people to stand with us. So you're right. I have really pushed the idea that one, we can't and we shouldn't do it alone. We need men to advocate. The one thing that I always say to mothers of sons when they're young is if we don't tell them, who will? If we don't nurture them, if we don't build the muscle in them of kindness and empathy and understanding, who's going to do it? And what I loved is all of that old school narrative, like, don't cry, be a man, all those messages that are archaic and they don't serve men, by the way. And they don't serve men in their relationships. They don't serve men in their life. And so my son, I always said I want to raise a feminist and a gentleman, fingers crossed.
Right.
But I really tried very deliberately. And what I mean by that is that it doesn't just happen, right? You have to talk about kindness and empathy. I also taught him a lot about women's bodies and how they work and explained to him about the different hormone cycles, especially when he was a teenager. And I knew that his female friends were having their periods and going through menses. And he was horrified to learn that every month you have a cycle and you need to wear a pad or a tampon. I will never forget his face. I mean, it was horror. And he was like, "What?" And I said, "Yeah, that's just the beginning." So one, I think it's important that we not terrorize, but educate so that boys understand we are different, which is lovely and wonderful. But I also was very purposeful about calling out behaviors and statements that should be better and should be different. And I didn't let it go. And I obviously didn't do it in public. I didn't embarrass him. But privately, I would say, hey, I want to talk to you about something that you and your friends said. And I want to give you a different perspective. It wasn't chastising and saying, don't do it. It was, I want to offer you a different perspective because it may change the way you think and change the way you behave. So I did it in a really accepting way that I think got into his cells and made and I also said, look, men that are my age might have been raised very different. They might have been told ideas and forced to adopt behaviors that no one told them any different. But you know better. So don't fall into these old school stereotypes because you deserve to be able to show your emotions, say how you feel, show how you feel. Not only is it not weak, it's incredibly brave, very, very brave. So I think it's so important that mothers of sons really lean into that. Fathers too, but they need to hear it from both of them.
I love the way you talked about the leaning into. And that's really what the key is being present and the offering and another perspective. That is something that my children have heard over and over and over again in their lives as well. And it's a really non-threatening way of just saying, I see you in your lived reality and your lived experience.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And not everyone has had your lived experience. And so let's think about it from this perspective. And when you get to the emotional connective part of that really makes a difference. Like actually understanding what is happening in the body of a woman and the energetic toll that takes every month is significant.
Well, yes. And by the way, I then appropriately carried it through to he's 18 now, he's in college. And I said, look, when you choose to be intimate with a partner, the responsibility is not just on her. It takes two to tango. And it matters that you are talking about your choices together if you're going to be intimate. How are you protecting from unwanted pregnancy? What is happening? And I really was mindful about that and to say, don't just leave it up to your partner and behave like, well, that's on her to deal with. And so that was interesting, complicated and interesting, but important. And, he shared a lot of my information with his friends. And I secretly was like, uh-oh, am I going to get a call from the other parents? But I didn't. So, but that's important too, to start the conversation that managing fertility, figuring out family planning isn't just on girls and women.
Absolutely. It is a joint conversation. If this is something we're going to do together, then we have to do all of it together and not just get the benefits of it, but also the the responsibility of it. So let's talk about Fexi and
Yes.
how it helps to support that conversation.
So thank you, by the way. So Phexxi is the first and the only FDA approved birth control that has no hormones. And I want to show you. So a prescription is a box of 12 pre-filled applicators. When a woman or girl opens this box, she sees 12 of these. Now, this you can put in your purse, you can put it in your pocket. It has a 4-year shelf life. But why I want to share it is that it's very small and simple, just like if you used a tampon. And you take off the pink cap, and each applicator has 5 milliliters of product. It's designed sperm to product ratio. So you put it in, you insert it right before sex or within an hour, you throw away the applicator. The product is lubricating. It's viscous. It's bioadhesive. It won't leak out of the vaginal cavity. But what women love is it's very lubricating. So anyone that had pain with intercourse, anyone that's already using lubrication, this is a no-brainer. But the beauty of it is that so many women experience hormonal side effects: headaches, weight gain, bleeding, emotional highs and lows, psychological things like, what is it going to do to my ability to get pregnant if I use synthetic birth control for 10 or 15 or 20 years? So the beauty of Phexxi is that it doesn't matter what other medications you're on. It doesn't matter what your weight is. It doesn't matter what your medical history. It will not interact with anything you're taking because there's no systemic activity in the body. And the final thing I want to say is how it works. All of our vaginal pH is 3.5 to 4.5. That's it. When sperm enters and you're not protected, your pH goes up to 7 or 8, and that's how you get pregnant. Our product helps a woman's body. It doesn't change her pH. It helps her body keep her natural pH, which makes it inhospitable to sperm. Yeah, so it's great. It's very, very exciting. Look, if you don't want to use hormones and you don't have sex every day, I mean, most women don't have sex every day. To take a medication every day of every week of every month when you're not having sex every day, if you don't want to do that, you don't have to anymore.
This is fascinating. And I want to back the conversation up a minute too. So let's talk about what's happening with traditional birth control. First, how's it impacting our bodies? And then how's it impacting our identity? Because I think those are two things that are both important to talk about. We're starting to see what some of the long-term impacts of long-term birth control use are. So can you speak to that and give people some information that they really need to understand?
Yes. So when you use a synthetic birth control, a pill, a patch, an IUD, if it has hormones in it, your body thinks it's already pregnant. That's why you don't get pregnant. So sometimes your body thinks it's pregnant for 5 years or 10 years if you're on birth control. So the long-term impacts, I will tell you that as more studies come out and as more people look at what is the impact, one, for most women, it actually lowers your libido. So the thing you're taking to have sex makes you not actually want to have it, which is a little crazy. It's kind of a crazy trick, right? And then when you think about the long term use, many women, when they stop using hormonal birth control, they physically feel different. Within 2 days, 7 days, they feel like a cloud has been lifted because all of their hormones are being managed like they're pregnant. And then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, you know what? I'm not crying like this. I don't feel a little unstable. I don't have those emotional highs and lows that I had before." There is even some studies that came out that your pheromones and your attraction might be a little different when you're on a synthetic hormone versus not being on a hormone. And then the controversial statement is, does it impact your fertility? Does it impact your ability to get pregnant if your body has thought it's been pregnant already? A lot of women who have been on long-term synthetic birth control have a very difficult time getting pregnant when they come off. And IVF, as we know, is emotionally grueling. It's financially grueling. And so we're taking a hard look at, is this long-term use of synthetic hormones really good for a woman's body? And the final thing is I use synthetic birth control for 20 years. And I'm a bit of a control freak, so I took it at the same time every day, like a good girl with discipline. Well, a few years ago, with no family history, no BRCA gene, no genetic predisposition, I ended up with very aggressive breast cancer. And if you were to say to me, if I were standing in front of a jury of judges, I would say the one sin that I did is use synthetic birth control for 20 years. Because other than that, I was very deliberate about my health. So long-term use, I don't have a daughter. Obviously, if I did, she couldn't use that anyway because of my cancer diagnosis. But I think we need to take a hard look at what really is happening. And if you don't feel as good as you should, not only should you think about what you're doing, you should think about what your daughters are doing, because it's clear the impacts are negative. And I understand short-term use can help with acne. It can help with heavy periods. But long-term use, there are side effects that are really damaging to women.
This is such an important conversation, and it's just not getting enough airtime. And so it's part of the reason why I'm so grateful that you're here today, because a lot of the people who listen to this podcast have young humans, right? Are empty nesters or have kids in that space. And having all of the information is what's important so you can make a really informed choice, right? So, like you said, it might be indicated for a short period of time for a specific issue. And we also have to look at what is all of the data telling us. And we are seeing rates of cancer in women in their late 30s, early 40s increase significantly. In my own circle of good friends, 4 have had breast cancer in the last 2 years. There is something in that that is not right.
And by the way, if you've had cancer, so 900,000 women get cancer every year. Those numbers are growing. And after you've had cancer, you shouldn't, if you're of reproductive age still, you shouldn't put another synthetic hormone in your body. So the good thing, strangely and serendipitous, I happen to run the company that has the product that has no hormones that you can use if you've had cancer, right? But look, to your point, I am 56. So a lot of my friends who have not gone through menopause, who are perimenopausal, okay, they say to me, 1, I have vaginal dryness. 2, I have pain with intercourse. 3, sex isn't as pleasurable as I would like it to be. And 4, I am not having sex every day. So it doesn't make sense to me to medicate myself every day. And the fascinating thing is we had a publication in the Journal of Sexual Medicine. It showed that by using Phexxi, women who used Phexxi had 2.5 times more pleasure than their previous birth control. And so that's because of the lubricating properties, right? But I will tell you that having all the information and really evaluating it, look, this breast cancer thing, it is scary. And look, early detection saves lives. It does. But the impact it has, not just on women, right? On their families, on their partners, on their children, it's long lasting. And so that's the big thing that I care about a lot is to say, look, really evaluate let's just say there's women listening to your podcast and they say, well, I had an IUD in, or I've had a ring, or I feel fine. Great. But think about how long you have used that and the duration in which you've had a synthetic hormone in your body. And although you might feel fine, perhaps it's time to take a hormone holiday, take a break from that, and see if you feel even more fine. See if you feel even better physically, not just psychologically, right? I really try to say, look, try a hormone holiday and see. So every woman that I've encouraged to do it, and they've actually done it, I promise you, like they'll send me a gift. They'll drop off a bottle of wine. They're like, God, we would have never done it because it doesn't occur to you, right? You're like, rinse and repeat. I take the same thing every day. I feel fine. And then they take a holiday and they're like, but I feel really good now. So that's been a cool thing.
So 2 things are coming to mind as you were saying that. So 1, hormones are the great messengers of our body. As a menopause consultant, that is always how I position it. And when we are controlling them, we are missing the messages that they are sending us. So we know that having killer health, right? What's happening with our cycle can be an indicator of what's going on internally with our general health and well-being.
100%.
Yeah, that's our body's way of communicating with us, of telling us what's working, what's not, what we need to bring our attention to.
You know what I love? I love that you just said that because as much as there have been these archaic messages that we force on men, there's also messages where women are raised to be pleasers and mediators and martyrs and put ourselves, it's noble to put yourself second. And they ignore signs from their body because they think it's no big deal. And they ignore it, or they suck it up, or they don't really address it. And instead, any of those signs and symptoms, they should say, you know what, my quality of life matters, because they're usually the glue for everybody that they touch, right? So I love that you said that. They got to really listen to these signs.
Absolutely. And that what you just said is totally connected to the other thing I was thinking about, which is that women are conditioned to be uncomfortable. So my husband and I were at a NoahCon concert in the fall, and we were standing on concrete for hours, and he was getting really complainy. He's like, my feet hurt and my knees hurt and my blah, blah, blah. And I had this moment of, you never really have to be uncomfortable. Where My whole existence is just living with discomfort from shoes, tampons, bras, like you name it, clothes that are too tight to make me smaller than I actually am, like all of the things. I have been taught how to live with discomfort and that is just part of being a woman.
I have to tell you, I'm stealing that. I love that so much. It is so true. And you know what's strange is like, no one's ever said it the way that you did. Like, we have been taught to accept and deal with discomfort. Like, that's what we deserve. We're just supposed to. I love that because, that's very eye opening, even for me to be like, you know what? We are conditioned to accept discomfort. There's nothing right about that, right?
No, and that these things actually are rites of passage, right? When
Yeah.
you get your first bra, it's a rite of passage of growing up and becoming a woman. When you have your period for the first time and you just, shove a tampon up there. Is it uncomfortable? Yes, but this is a rite of passage for you. Birth control. Does it make you feel different? Maybe it does, but you know what? This is what you need to do. All of these things, all of these stages of discomfort are rites of passage in telling us what it is to be a woman in
Oh my goodness. I really mean this. Like, I have chills. I'm like, I have got to capture those. That is so important to point out because you know what that does? That allows, truthfully, when you say it like that, because I deal with mostly all men as investors. And they don't know. They have no idea, and nor should they. But what I love is to be able to say that it's a rite of passage. We have been conditioned, and even talking about the bra and the period, because those things they can relate to with their wives and their girlfriends and their daughters. And it's true. It's a way to help men understand, to bring them into the conversation and create empathy, not sympathy, empathy.
Absolutely. I've been doing some research, collecting men's voice around what they want to know about perimenopause, menopause, what they don't know. And the thing that has come through the most in the qualitative data I've collected is exactly that. They actually are curious and want to know, but do not have the language to ask in a way that feels safe for themselves or their partner. Yeah. And so offering that information in a way that actually allows them to sort of sit in our high-heeled shoes and
Yep.
see how that feels, and then giving them the language to have conversation with their partner, it's a gift because we know at this stage, midlife, perimenopause, the data lines up really well that this is where the highest rates of divorce are happening, right?
100%. I had to write this down because you know why? Listen, I had to write it because it's so powerful. And you'd think, well, isn't she going to remember? Listen, sometimes, I'm
Yeah,
a
I
little
do.
crazy. And, I actually, you know what I do? Because I had cancer, I blame everything on chemo brain. So then no one can be mad because it's chemo brain. And the people are like, would you give me a break? You've been using that excuse for 5 years. And I'm like, well, so anyway, sorry about that. I had to because it's so good. Sorry. It's so
No, thank you. And you saying that actually makes me think too, it's another way that we aren't given the space. Like your body went to war and back, and we are given a timeline of how long it's okay to be in that space. We're starting to hear it now with perimenopause, like, oh, well, just everything is perimenopause. You have to get over it. Or grief falls into this category as well, right? There's a timeline and there's grief in the process that you went through in, tr-
sure.
in treatment and process. And we put a timeline of acceptability, and it's not very long.
It's not very long at all. Exactly. That is true too. There really is this finite amount of time you're allowed to feel a certain way, and then you got to get over it. And you think, you know what? We should do a paradigm shift on that. You know what I mean? You should create your own timeline, right? When you're ready, you're ready. Who knows how long it's going to take, right? And I like that. That's really good.
Yeah, my mom died when I was 30 and she was 52 and she died of cancer and it happened very quickly. But I was also on a mat leave and I had to go back to work 3 weeks after she had passed away. So I was dealing with that. I had a toddler and a 1 year old, and I went back to school. And a couple of days in, when a colleague walked by and was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Well, no, not really." Like I'm feeling a little sad. And he looked at me and was like, "Well, didn't your mom die like a month ago?" Yeah,
You were like, "Do you get a lot of dates with that charm, honey?" I mean, hello.
I know. And I just felt like, what on earth? Like, you get 1 month and that's it, and then you just have to, like, tuck yourself all back in and be totally fine again. And I think it again, like, connects back to this, we are conditioned to be uncomfortable. Just
Yeah.
live in the discomfort on the inside, but on the outside, continue to be the person that makes everybody else comfortable.
Exactly, right? Put on this mask, put on your Teflon robot shield, and just operate because that's what you're supposed to do. I will say that what I love about the conversation is that being able to say when he said to you, "Are you okay?" You're like, "Not really." Right? It's not being a Debbie Downer. It's having a level of self-awareness to say, "You know what? Really as great as I need to be." And that, by the way, is courageous too. It says, "I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine." And when you're really not fine at all. So that's an interesting point that I love that you made. It's really important.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to Phexxi again for a second because one of the things that comes up a lot in terms of the perimenopause conversation
Okay.
when we're talking about hormone therapy, which is a fractional amount in comparison to birth control, and it does not have a birth control impact. And so people will say, "Well, I'm still menstruating. What do I do?" Because I am starting hormone therapy, but I still need birth control. And so this, I think, is a good option for people to be able to use in that kind of like the messy middle space where, and I mean, let's be honest, the majority of healthcare practitioners don't know how all of these pieces fit together.
It's true. Look, that's a very important point, I think, for women is that when you're in that space of this, by the way, you're still fertile. I mean, you can still get pregnant. And the myth and the misconception, as you probably know better than most, is that, well, you're not as fertile. So many women get pregnant unintended, unplanned when they're in that sort of messy middle place. And the one beauty of this product that I love so much is that it's perfect for that. I mean, literally perfect. Because one, you have a box of 12. Now, if you tell your provider you have sex more than that, you can get 2 boxes of 12 for your monthly prescription. But there's a 4-year shelf life and it's so easy to use. Literally put it in right before sex or any window within an hour. The most important part is, are you ready? So we've been on the market for 4 years. We have less than 1% of pregnancies. Less than 1%. By the way, hormonal birth control cannot claim that because a lot of women will miss their pill. I mean, if you have an IUD, you don't control it. So that's a silver bullet. But outside of an IUD, okay, and I think the reason we have less than 1% of pregnancies is because when women choose no hormones, they choose sex on demand. They say, hey, look, men have had condoms for 150 years. I got this. I am in charge of my body and I'm going to use this right before sex or any window within an hour, but it makes your vaginal cavity, the lubricating properties they're really amazing. And you think to yourself, right? There's no odor, there's no taste, it stays in the vagina. Look, this is still the same thing I showed you before, it's still there, okay? It just absorbs in the vaginal cavity. But to your point, that in-between stage where you don't really want to take something every day. You don't want to put a synthetic hormone in your body every day. And you think to yourself, withdrawal, rhythm, and usually they've been with their partner. Their partner doesn't want to wear a condom. But why take a risk? Why take a risk when you don't have to? And so, look, as a menopause consultant as you are, this is a product that is perfect for the middle ground. And even, by the way, women who've had a baby and they say they want to space their pregnancies and they
Right.
don't want to have hormones in their breast milk and they might want to have a baby in 2 years from now. But by the time their body's filled with more synthetic hormones and then they got to cleanse it before they get pregnant again, it's like, come on, why don't you just use this as your middle woman? I was going to say middleman, middle woman until you're ready again. That's what's awesome about this, to your point, right? It's a good bridge to where women are going, wherever it is.
It can solve a lot of problems. And I also want to get into talking about the importance of pleasure because we are getting pretty good about talking about the science of everything, right? Of why things work. And equally as important is pleasure and that sex can actually feel good and be something that is supportive of our identity. One of the things I talk about a lot is working with women to really think about like, what is it that I actually want? And what if your whole life you've had sex that was fine, but now you get to this phase where you have some time to think about like, what do I actually want this to be? And so let's talk about how this also really helps to support. We've talked about the lubricating factor. What are the other factors that really help women start to take back their power in sex and pleasure and enjoyment and what that means in the context of the divine feminine?
Tell you something fascinating. So, I this year, for the first time, went to a sexual health conference. Now, normally I go to all these clinical conferences. I went to a conference where everything was about sex and pleasure. And I mean, everything. Some of the visuals were, my mother might have blushed. I did not. I did not. What was fascinating was it's like a whole world that I had never been introduced to, meaning like flavored vaginal wipes and different vibrators and all of these things. My point in saying it though is that the majority of the customers were our age. We're 40s to 60s. And ready? They literally are saying, you know what? Sex was okay. I kind of believed that it was good enough because I didn't really know any better. And then once I started thinking, maybe I need some lubrication. Maybe I need something else for pleasure. Maybe I need something else to stimulate me. And it's not dirty. It's not pornographic. It's not shameful. It's not bad. And the one thing, so we were the only company there that had a prescription product. And at first, people were like, what are you doing here? And once I talked to them about the fact that women have been told that suffering is okay. So the idea, one, what a lot of women that were there said to me is they loved the idea that they were empowered to have sex on demand, something they used only when they needed it, never when they didn't. And then there were several practitioners there, like women like yourself, who really are counselors and guides for women through their reproductive journey, who said that when the women that they counseled used Fex, they said they loved the idea of putting it in front of their partner. That they were like, you know what? I'm comfortable with my own body. A man could put on a condom. I'm going to insert the applicator, throw it away, and it's going to be awesome because I'm comfortable with my sexuality. I'm empowered to use this product. It's lubricating. And they said their partners loved it. Loved both the empowerment on demand. They loved the lubricating properties, but it was almost like this like sexual empowerment that made women feel good.
Yes, yes. It's actually what first brought Phexxi to my attention was the commercial that came out during September Save Vagina Month with
Yeah.
Annie of our Schitt's Creek fame. We Canadians, we like to claim.
Yeah. She's amazing, by the way, but yes, yes.
And that is what came through so clearly actually in that commercial and was what made me like sit up and pay attention was this empowerment of I have spent my like decades not owning my own sexual power. And in this stage, I got nothing to lose now.
Exactly. Exactly. You got nowhere to go but up. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So why not at this stage make it part of who you are? Like when we're really asking that question of who do I want to be? And one of the words that keeps coming up for me is sexier, and not sexier in the like way that we have been conditioned to think about it, but in my own skin. Yeah.
Yeah. It's such a personal, intimate, soulful thing to be like, you know what? I feel good about my body. I know how to take care of my body. I'm using something that makes my body feel good. And that confidence is sexy. it is. It's sexy to know that you're doing something that feels good in the act of intimacy, but also feels good to yourself. Like, I'm taking care of myself. I'm using something that makes me feel good. And it is super sexy. And I love that you said that because so when I speak at some investor conferences, okay, the room is full of all men. And so I would 9 o'clock in the morning, I'd turn the lights down and I would play this video that this song like birds flying high, like Michael Bublé, right? And it was all about bedroom doors shutting, like ba-boom, ba-boom. And women and men, okay, and these investors be like, and I'd say, gentlemen, we're going to talk about sex at 9. You should. And you can. And people were like, is this woman a pornographer? Like, what's going on? Because I thought to myself, right, why talk if no one's going to listen? I can tell you, they were listening to me. They were listening to every word I said. They were like, what? But what was awesome is that it was like I said, look, all birth control is marketed with fear. You don't want to get pregnant. You don't want to get pregnant. You don't want to get pregnant. Shame, shame, shame on you. Shame on you, woman. You're in control, woman. If you get pregnant, it's your misstep. And I said, who wins in that? We want to market a brand that is the opposite, that is about what an idea. Women should have pleasurable sex. My goodness, heresy. You should have pleasurable sex? What are you thinking? And it was so strange that it never occurred to anybody, right? That it was okay for women to be empowered with pleasure and sex. And that, by the way, it would positively impact their relationships with their partners, you know? And the final thing, not to go off on a tangent, but the craziest thing that really helped me talk to men about our product was when I said to them, let me ask you a question. If I said to you, I would like your son to take a medication every day, and I said, oh, by the way, he's going to have side effects every day. Oh, and by the way, he's going to use it for 5 or 10 or 15 years. He doesn't need it to save his life, though. So what do you think of that? Is that a good idea? And they'd be like, what? And I said, why is this okay for your daughters? Why is that okay? And that was a big aha moment for some of the male investors who support me because they were like, whoa, that, because they don't contemplate. Because a lot of times, by the way, women our age or women older than us, they're like, why would I talk to my partner about my birth control? He doesn't care anyway. And I think like, are you sure? Maybe he does. Have you tried it? Maybe he does care. He's never had the opportunity to have the conversation with you. Why don't you give him a try? You might be surprised, right? But the whole pleasure thing is, I promise you, it is at the root of this product because women deserve pleasurable sex. They do. Come on, right? And they deserve the idea. They deserve to know that they deserve it and own that too.
Absolutely. Thank you. You really highlighted for me, again, it's the idea of the joy in the revolution, right? We are living in a time that is incredibly challenging. We see what is happening to women's health. We see the lack of funding, the defunding of research, the issues around abortion, all of those things. And when you said, birth control has been marketed through fear, and I thought that is the sphere we are in right now, is fear. Everything is fear. And this approach through joy and pleasure is the way that we reclaim that from the jaws of fear, right? So thank you for putting that context together for me, because I think that's really important for people to think through for themselves. And if they have young humans in their lives, also to introduce that to them, that this does not have to come from a place of fear. It can absolutely come from this place of like great joy and pleasure and reclamation.
I love that. It's true, right? It's true. And I will say this too. The one thing around getting out of this jaws of fear is that when you have no hormones being put in your body, when there's no systemic activity, when you're in charge of using this product, it also gives you the power to discard that fear, right? You discard it because you know exactly what's happening with your body. But I do think the more we talk about that, I think the more not only women, but they will translate that to their daughters to be able to say, you know what, you decide what you deserve. And pleasure is part of it, right? It shouldn't be a chore to have sex with your partner. You don't need to have 2 martinis, although I do like to have 2 martinis, but you shouldn't have to have 2 martinis, you know what I mean? But yes.
Yes. Yeah. Sandra, thank you so much for your time today. This has been such a powerful conversation. I'm so grateful for your wisdom and for everything that you're creating in this world that is really supportive of women's health. Thank you.
By the way, thank you. I could talk to you for days. I wish we were locked in an elevator right now, but I
Me too.
really, it was my pleasure, and thank you for having me so much.
And all of the information about Phexxi and how to buy the product and how to connect with Saundra will be in the show notes. So make sure you check that out.
Thank you.
Thank you for hanging out with me on Transforming 45. If you laughed, nodded, or had an oh wow moment, hit follow and share it with your favorite midlife human. Find me on Instagram at @lboat and keep those transformations coming.
Electric acid.